Like if a guy wanted to sell you ice cream, what song would
Uh, like
translate the
here,
words
get
at
some.
least? You know, like
Yeah,
what
get
was?
some cold ice cream, refreshes your body, something like that. You know,
Yeah,
like they were pretty catchy.
yeah.
I'll give them that.
Did they go into
Yeah.
great detail about the ice cream, or just focused on please buy now, please buy now?
So they would go into the taste of the ice cream, different
Good gosh.
flavors, and all of that stuff.
What is the most popular flavor that you remember seeing? Like those vendors selling ice cream on the street?
I don't know what to
Orange?
call it in. I don't know what you. There's a word for it in Hindi, but I don't know what to call it in English.
Is it a
It's kind of
fruit?
like it's beige in color. Yeah, it's called cardamom.
Oh, cardamom.
Cardamom. Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
most popular flavor.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's like yeah, that's like our spice, right? Cardamom.
Yeah, but in ice cream, it's really great. It tastes really awesome as an ice cream flavor.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste like spicy or anything like that.
Huh.
It's
So
because it's mixed in with milk and everything.
yeah. I thought that this post that someone shared on social media was interesting about Johann Sebastian Bach. I shared it. It says, did you know that Johann Sebastian Bach lost his little daughter, then his three sons, and then his wife? He later remarried and together with his second wife, Anna Magdalene, lost four more daughters and three sons, 11 beloved children. Many researchers
That's
wonder,
crazy.
how was Bach able to cope with these losses? How come his breathing didn't stop? How come his heart didn't stop? And most importantly, how can he continue writing songs, singing suites for cello, masses, concerts, the most beautiful music the world has ever heard? Do you know how you do it? At the end of the score, he always wrote Sole Deo Gloria, glory to God only. And at the beginning, he wrote, Lord, help me. Therefore, you can pray during Bach's music because his music itself is prayer. Bach's music is a conversation between man and God.
That's how like it's really legitimately very traumatizing. It must have been very full of suffering for him to go through all of that.
Yeah.
Like not to like we can think about a parent losing one kid, and then going into a downward spiral from there. But like he lost so many children. Like that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that too with two different women.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to talk about mystery on our program today and to hone in on embracing the mystery of life as a kind of pro-life position. So let's start here. A lot of people say that they're pro-life, but I think it's ironic because so many people who say they're pro-life are not actually pro-life in the sense that they want a denial of life. And I think it's a mistranslation. I think you've suggested as such, maybe the misunderstanding about some of the passages in the Bible about the denial of the flesh and the rejection of the world, and all these different things end up becoming twisted because of misunderstandings and other layers of ideology and philosophy added on top of these things to skew our filters in a direction that says more than what it was actually intending to say. And that this denial of life becomes a kind of escapism religion, which makes people easy to be labeled as you're following the opium of the masses because you're trying to escape. You look at the suffering of 11 kids dying and the greatness of the art of Bach, and you say, oh, that must have been his coping mechanism to believe in God. And it's like, no, the art was inspired by the mystery of what he went through, of why these things happen. It helps fuel this search for God. So you wrote an article on a neighborschoice.com called How the Eucharist Saves the World, which talks about the ritual of eating meals. This is a topic that we've explored in the past on the program through the years, but you bring in some interesting, quotes and ideas from different thinkers like Jean-Michel Gorlian, who's come on the program a few times, and Rene Girard, talking about the power of having a meal together. And I think that's an important place to go when we talk about the mystery of life, because the mystery of life ultimately is dealt with around a meal. Because when you come together for a meal is when you share stories. It's when you figure out what's going on in the shadows. If you're around a campfire and you're having a meal and you hear some noises, you tell a story about it. I think that's a leopard. I think that's a goblin. I think that's a rival tribe. I think that's thunder. I think that's a fire. I think that's a Bigfoot or a skunk ape if you're in Florida. That's where the mystery comes from, is sharing a meal around a fire, sharing a meal together to have a community, unity with people together, sharing a meal together. And unfortunately, so much of civilization has fenced off the meal in a way that denies people equal standing to have dignity, to have, a kind of equality before God. And that was one of the revolutionary things about the Christian story as it spread through the Roman Empire, is it upended the ritual of placing people in different positions during a meal, to say that everybody, no matter how poor you were or how disfigured you were or handicapped you were or whatever it was that made you a target for ostracization, you were welcomed together as an equal child of God when it came to the meal of the Eucharist, and then the meal that would come with that.
Yeah, in the ancient times, meal eating was very much part of the differentiation between tribes. And the reason it was like that is because of our history with cannibalism, right? So, like societies, advanced civilizations were built upon cannibalism, and cannibalism is of course also connected with ritually killing a scapegoat. So what many people would often do is uh, they would, consume the one who was killed, after they imparted some kind of deification on that victim that was slain, because that victim that was slain had united
Yeah.
the warring parties, the conflicting parties, and they would, because of that uniting aspect, that catharsis that came in after a sacrifice, they would consume the flesh of the victim that was slain, because they wanted some of that being, that power, that uniting power that they thought was there in that slain victim. So that's, a lot of people might be put off by this, but that's where the ritual meal eating comes in, is that as we, like many societies, as they progressed, they would substitute animals for human flesh.
And there's something about, there's a physical effect. Rene Girard says that when you are up in arms and at each other's throat because you're imitating each other in a sea of sameness, that sea of sameness is hungry. It becomes, and I've described it this way, it becomes like a unified Borg, a blob of meta humanity, a collective Borg or hive, like a beehive, united in sameness at each other's throats. And it's almost as if they need to find in their minds an ability to agree on someone that is wholly different from them. Either they're small, or they're too tall, or they're handicapped, or they're a different ethnicity from a warring tribe that has been kidnapped, or they're too old, or too pretty, or too ugly, or something that just seems extraordinarily different. Or they need to be accused of something which seems extraordinarily, ridiculously outside the boundaries of differentiation. That makes them different. Nobody else is mating with a goat except for this guy. Kill him. Or nobody else has 3 eyes like Cyclops. Kill him. Nobody else is this beautiful. Everybody else is relatively homely. Get her. Nobody else is this short. A dwarf must be a demon. Get him, right? That monstrous differentiation that they perceive creates a magnetic frequency of similar charged up energy that's so exhaustively hungry for the opposite pole that they have perceived that person to have. This is like a magnet, right? So let's say we're all free floating magnets. Things get really high friction because you have small amount of resources, or you have similar habits, and it can get to be too much repulsion because we're all the same. Repelling. And we know all this time, people will say to this day, that person is repulsive to me. Can't stand to be in their presence, right? And then oftentimes we also hear the idea that the things that irritate us the most about people are the things that remind us of ourselves, right? That's a clue to the magnetic, mimetic repulsion effect that's taking place. When you feel like you're too close to somebody, they like the Star Wars you like. They like the food you like. They dress the same way you do. They sit the same way you do. They talk the same way you do. They hold their head this way when you're talking. They smile the same way. They put their teeth out the same way. Whatever it is, too much of that just gets to this repulsive perception because it feels like your perception and their perception is just too close to maintain your sense of who you are, which is this interdependent mimetic being, and you're getting wrapped up in too much closeness means you're losing your sense of ownership over your identity. And that's a repulsive feeling. It's going to repel you like two magnets put in the same charge, positive, boop, they're going to move away. Boop, they're going to move away. That moving away, boop, is very irritating feeling. It repels you. You want to get away from them. I can't stand you. Don't like you. Leave me alone. You're bad. But as you fall away, right, those magnets realign. Uh-oh. Now the opposite poles have realigned and they're attracting. And then you get too close and you see the perception of one another is too close. Repelling. Oh, they're attracting. They've rotated again. Now they're repelling. That's why sometimes, when best friends get irritated, take a little break, come back. And it's reset the attraction again, right? The attraction is back. They're different. You took a week off of chit-chatting. Now you're attracted back towards each other. Oh, we're having a good time. Then we get too close together. Too much sameness, too much rivalry. Ooh, it's repelling. Oh, now it's attracting. This is the same dynamic Girard talks about on a mimetic level, an observed human behavior level of the push-pull of desire. So I know I just said a lot of things there, but we're just kind of putting these things out there and then we're going to piece them all together.
Well, that's why the ancient societies, they were what you described, it was a mystery to them, right? And because of that, you find a lot of symbolism in their in the way they told the stories about origins and everything, where you would see a lot of twin brothers symbology because of the magnetic description, that you said, because they perceive twins as some kind of, like what do you say? What would you say it? It's kind of like some frightening sacral thing, right? Where you would have to keep it under constraint through sacrificial rituals or whatever. And that would also explain why people engaged in cannibalism is because, like you mentioned, when they would start getting attracted to another person, one way that they would solve that is through the murder and the consummation of the other person who was murdered, right? So when magnets, we human beings are a lot like magnets, right? We would often be attracted towards one another, like you described, like two friends when they would get attracted to one another. They would start the way that attraction works in anthropology is we would desire each other's desire. We would desire each other's desire, or we would want to, to such an extent that we would want to become the other person, or unconsciously, want to become another person.
Yeah.
Especially the rival, that we are attracted to.
Yeah.
And that's why you see the twin brothers symbology. It's because it's not because like the of literal twin brothers, but it's because as you are attracted to another person, you tend to become more and more like him, and gain similar characteristics. And
Yeah.
the cannibalism is just that, going to the next step of, in consuming that other person
Yeah.
so that you become like him.
Yeah. The modern world recognizes the danger of differentiation, and they recoil. Modern society, including us, we recoil at sharpening differences too much because we're afraid that it will cause sacrificial scapegoating violence. But we're not as much afraid of the other type of violence, which is mimetic rivalry, which is fueled by sameness. The modern world is more aware of the violence that comes from differentiation, right? But it's more blind to the reality of the rivalry and violence that comes from competition, right? And that's why the modern world is more anti-religion than it is anti-person, anti-self, I should say. Right? It's very much pro-self, very anti-religion. Religion is the way in which societies were able to maintain boundaries and differentiation by marking out certain behaviors or certain people that would be candidates for safe sacrificial violence, consuming their difference to maintain the society's structural integrity. And so that is something that the modern mind scapegoats the religion for, because that's what I'm trying to get at, is that the modern sensibility is still counter to what Rene Girard talks about. The modern sensibility still says that we fight because of our differences. We fight because of racism. We fight because of gender discrimination. We fight because of nationalism. We fight because of ethnic, sense of superiorities or whatever. We fight because of gender identity or something. We fight because of the differences, because they're obsessed with rooting out the final piece of the mimetic cycle, which is the sacrificial coming together, united against someone because they're different. But as Girard says, the difference that we put in there is somewhat arbitrary, and that the real violence at the heart of it is the first violence, which is the belief that our desires are truly from ourselves, and that we should worship them and follow them to their own extent, to the point that we get into conflict with people who get in our way, who we feel like are robbing us of our acquisition of our desires, which in reality, as Girard says, is just a token representation of our desire to be one with our neighbor. We want to be one with our neighbor, but as we try to become one with our neighbor, we find repulsion taking place because like charges repel. And the thing about the mind is, it's so interesting. This is not a deterministic, when I'm linking physics, as we've done through the years, when I'm linking physics here, I'm not making a deterministic thing here, because ultimately the mind is subjective. And the mind subjectively determines that the feeling that that person is too close. It's a subjective decision. This is what the mystery of becoming one in marriage, or becoming one in the Eucharist, right? The idea of reinterpreting oneness so that you overcome the like charge repulsion effect that happens when you become so alike that it will create rivalry. It's overcoming that. And that's what I think is taking place with the Eucharist, the denial of the false sense of the mimetic self and the accepting of an external self, which is found in the unity of God, right? The triune family relationship of God that we're brought into. That external being and becoming that we're becoming and God is becoming it with us together. The marriage supper of the Lamb is the picture of that at its conclusion. But we're in the process of this happening now. It allows us to be able to overcome our perception of monstrous similarities as we become united, right? And that's the process of relationship healed post crucifixion. Once the scapegoat is dissolved, Jesus said, I will draw all men unto me, meaning he is like a magnet. He's going to become an irresistible force that's magnetically attracting all reality, all storytelling towards the form that he has represented in history. And along the way, as it draws us towards this, the first thing that starts to fall apart is the scapegoat mechanism, because that was the false religion that man had used up until that point until it was revealed to him that it was false. But the secondary issue that also has to be discarded along that way is the mimetic rivalry violence, which is bred through, comes through sameness. This is so interesting to me because, again, modern culture is always looking to root out differences because they believe that's the occasion for horrible violence and evil things to happen. And there's a point to that, see, this is the conservative types don't typically get that because they just want to put the package back into, let's just bring back hierarchy like it's 1000 AD or something and like or 800 AD or 30 AD or whatever it is your favorite period of history is that you romanticize. But you can't go there because history is a process. It's going somewhere, right? Something's happening, right? We're moving in a direction. You can't retreat. You can't go home again. And so that process of becoming attracted to Christ means that first we have to shed the scapegoat mechanism, but at the same time we have to shed the myth of the self so that we can overcome our perception of irritation that takes place the more we become like each other. Isn't that fascinating? So in the sense, God is becoming all in all, and we are becoming all in all as well, which is why we're having this state of perceived undifferentiation that drives us nuts because we want to maintain our romantic self. And there is a way. That's so funny. Think about it. There is a way to keep that self back as long as you're orienting it back into the habits that Christ models for you, right? Because Christ, we believe in Christianity that in the end of time, you're still going to have yourself in some way. You're not going to dissolve yourself. That's what makes the Western Christianity different from the Eastern religions, right? The dissolution of the self is the ultimate end game of most of the Eastern traditions. But with the Western, the self is maintained in some degree, but fully realized in that full perfect state, right?
Yeah, this is why the moderns were they're actually right in attacking the old traditionalist kind of Christianity, in the sense that we conservatives often overlook that this old traditionalist kind of Christianity is the reason for why things have gone to this part, right? Not that I'm indicting that kind of thing, but I'm saying in this process, dialectical kind of progression of history that you are describing, which is true dialectic, not false dialectic. It's progressing because people are developing a kind of reaction to that old way of thinking.
Yeah.
So when people are rebelling against these old traditions, and conservatives want to preserve it without knowing why want to preserve it, this is because of that differentiation that you mentioned. And people want to actually go past, transcend. A Christ haunted culture actually wants to transcend that old differentiation, which we can actually see in countries like India and all of these global south kind of countries,
Yeah.
where you still have the barriers of caste system, gender differentiation, and they're really not pleasant. Trust me when I say this, they're really not pleasant to experience. So what you really see is an unconscious, you know, wanting to transcend that old uh, ideology, that old way of thinking. It's precisely because it is kind of like a disciplinary phase, that old way of thinking. It's not really progressive. It's like a disciplinary kind of thing, right? And you can't be stuck on a disciplinary phase for the entirety of human history. It what disciplinary what quote unquote repentance, staying in a state of repentance for all eternity brings is stagnation, and you never really graduate from the academy by doing that.
Yeah.
You always stay in the training phase. And that's I think that's part of the reason why people want to go past that, because they sense that there is something in nature. There is all sorts of things to explore that we haven't really even tapped into.
Yeah.
And that's really what Christ has infected humanity with when he does all of these signs and wonders, and when he resurrects from the tomb. That's you know I don't think it's fair to say that it's only the victim concern thing that has haunted the world after Christ ascended. It's also all of these other things that Christ did, like you know all of these signs and wonders, the healing of the sick, or the healing of the leper, and multiplying the fish and loaves. All of these things, people don't want to stay in the old order of things because they have glimpsed into the glory
Right.
of
That's a good
heaven.
point. Yeah. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
said that the fishes and loaves is probably best to be understood as a prophecy of something that's going to happen in history, where we alleviate scarcity through a nonviolent, voluntary action of self-giving, right? And that's why a lot of the conservatives get mad and they say, no, you can never reach a post-scarcity world. And that's their fear reacting to the communism, right? Ideology of communism, which tries to violently engineer reality in a way that artificially creates a post-scarcity world that is never achievable through violence. But Christ says, no, you can achieve a post-scarcity world, and you can achieve that through a kind of nonviolent, self-giving inventions, innovations, and service to one another, just like that image of the fishes and loaves. This guy donates this, the kid donates this voluntarily, he gives it up, his meal, and it ends up feeding the whole world through a nonviolent sharing. It doesn't mean that requires some kind of government, dissolution of property to get us to a class consciousness or some garbage like communism does. But see, conservatives are so fixated on rivalry with their rivals that they're just saying, oh my God, there will never be a post-scarcity world. It will always be bleak. It will always be hard sacrifice and toil and struggle. That's all we could ever hope for. And I'm like, no, that's not what the Bible says. Once we're restored in Adam, in the new Adam, we are situated back to the dominion mandate and given the tools to unleash it. So, I hate this notion that so many conservative Christians have, which is this hatred of life. That's what I mean by you're not really pro-life. If you think the point is to emaciate yourself, to deprive yourself, to take fasting to the point of an idol, to take fasting to the point of a worldview ideology that encompasses the way you react to everything. All your senses are dangerous. All your senses and passions, none of them can ever be redeemed. They're all just naughty, dirty things at best. All these different things are supposed to be kind of shied away from, as you're supposed to like embrace this cross. But that's not what happens when you embrace the cross. When you embrace the cross in the Christ-like way, you are resurrected, fully allowed to eat breakfast again, as he did. You're fully allowed to associate and have a meal with people. And in fact, you can't really find Christ in that story until he's having a meal with people. In other words, he's hanging out with that group, those guys, and he's giving them facts that might register in their left brain hemisphere about showing him in the scripture where he came from and how he was coming. Probably showed him the cornerstone stories and all that. But they don't fully recognize him as such until they have a meal. And once they have a meal, that community, that sharing of unity together without violence is the thing that allows them to see him for who he really is, right? Which is the restoration of community without the need for violence. Both the mimetic ego violence that we do to each other all the time and the collective violence. And we know this collective violence happens all the time. You go to a business and the office, there's one guy that they don't like. The office is always talking when he's not in the room. They're all, you start as a new employee and you realize, wait a second, I'm a new employee to a new office, and they have a common enemy and they share their unity. They each of them have their own little jealousies and envies toward one another, but they sublimate it in the service of, well, we don't like that guy. So they don't talk about their problems with one another as much. They harbor them in their heart and suppress them, and they cast them off onto the back of the guy or girl or whoever it is that they really don't like. She shows up too late. She doesn't come into the office enough. She gets favors, or he gets favors from the manager that we don't get. They don't put as much work into it as we do. They don't know their job. They don't know how to do the software or the program or whatever it is that you're doing like we do. And that becomes the binding agency that binds them together, because they're not them. They're not the other. And that's what makes the scapegoat so irresistible. But the problem is, because Christ has dissolved it, it's not as effective anymore. It tends to break down. And that's why people don't really unite for long with a common enemy, because rivalries are always going to be popping up. Schisms are already going to be popping up. And it's very easy for people to defect and join the person that they're scapegoating and say, actually, I like that person, and then now there's a faction that's uniting around the person who used to be the scapegoat, and now it becomes a civil war, right? Which is not a cohesive environment for a business or a community. This happens all the time. There's a physics component to it, and then there's a social level component to it that we call mimesis. I want to go back to this idea, though. I think it's so fascinating to think of the way society unites around. They get caught up in a sense of friction. So much undifferentiation rivalry is taking place that they unite around the fact that they're not the other, the scapegoat. So let's say it's a society of everybody is 7 foot. Everybody in this town is 7 foot tall or higher. One time, somebody is born and raised, and they end up to be only 4 foot. Now the community is going along. They lose crops. There's a famine. The rain didn't come as much this year. They're getting stressed out. And that little 4 foot person is really starting to feel like maybe their arrival into the community is just the thing that has upset the equilibrium of life. That's how it feels. It's not true, but it feels that way. And there's a group feeling that sets in. Well, this person is just something not right. And now, in the ancient times, that's then attributed to things like, well, that's a scapegoat, or excuse me, that's a sign of a god. A god is displeased with that person. A god, or that's a demon, or maybe they did something to create the environment by which they become 4 foot and everybody else is 7 foot. Maybe they breach some kind of protocol of proper behavior, right? In terms of taboos. Maybe they were a product of incest. I'm serious. This is the kind of stuff that ancient societies were attributing to people who had some kind of arbitrary difference that made them stand out. Once that arbitrary difference is all perceived by the community to one degree or another, it creates a binding force, an irresistible force attracted to that target who has this perceived intoxicating difference. That's what makes them eat them. Because when you eat that difference, it satiates the conflict that's causing the society to lose its mind, which is too much sameness. They devour the representative of exotic difference. So it's like a disease. Too much sameness breeds contempt. But then you look and you see, well, you know what? We're not the 4 foot person. We're all 7 feet here. And that exotic perception that they all start to collectively get possessed by. We are not that 4 foot person. That person is 4 foot, not 7 foot. That person, that's the magnetic effect of an opposite pole, the positive, let's just call it that, the positive pole of the community, bound together by the fact that they're not 4 foot, draws them towards the irresistible, and they devour it and they eat it. And that eating, the Eucharist points this out, but the devouring of that person who perceives to be wholly other and different from them, in some ways provides a shared experience that satiates the maddened undifferentiation that they were afflicted by, because they feel like they have destroyed or eaten the person who was totally intoxicatingly different, that was causing all of their feeling of of irritation and annoyance. What I think is also important, I want you to jump in here, but I just want to add one more layer to the mix. When you eat the person, you cook the whole thing, you're getting thyroid you're consuming their thyroid, which is, as we know from Ray Peat, you got these hormones, you're going to get a sensational heart perception is going to be coming up. A lot of people who take thyroid medicinally notice their perception of their heart way more in tune with their heart, way more alive, way more euphoric. I think that is an added layer that needs to be investigated by anthropologists that I'm thinking out loud and sharing on the show for the first time. You're devouring the heart, which is the most magnetic, has the strongest magnetic field of any organ in the body, and you're devouring you're going to be devouring glands like the thyroid. You cook a soup. I know this sounds vulgar, but we're talking in a way that hopefully we can kind of separate our appetites, please, from this discussion. If you're eating your sandwich, you might want to put it down, but you're cooking a soup, you've got the thyroid in there too, which is going to be releasing all of this magnetically rich driver of your mitochondrial life, so that when you're consuming this person, you're literally feeling like you're consuming someone's life force, that you're consuming their magnetic energy, which confirms in a physiological sense the perception that they had something intoxicatingly different that you needed together as a community. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about the repeat paradigm is that the you're not supposed to stay away from food that are delicious, right? And I think God is like that. That's why God doesn't outright tell us to you know stop eating meals because this is all built on violence and everything, but God repurposes this important bodily function of ours of eating food and delicious food and all of that. He's repurposing that in a way that sounds that tastes really good, and does not bring in separation or hostility, but brings in solidarity and that shared experience of brotherhood, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So like coming back to that sacrificial study is that like we devoured our victims for being different, and consuming them afterwards.
Yeah.
uh Jesus offers himself up to be the wholesome substitute for all innocent human victims, so that once we consume him in the form of the Eucharist, we are satiated, right? We are no longer hungry, and we are no longer hungry because God himself has come down from heaven and offered himself to us, so that our cannibalistic bloodthirstiness is satiated once and for all, right? So that we no longer feel the need to kill other human beings
Yeah.
for being different, or whatever else. And in doing that, Christ has made and I write this in the article you mentioned, and in doing that, Christ has made food taste great again. So what I mean by that is no longer like you don't have to worry about when you're eating food whether it's clean, whether it's deemed clean or unclean. You don't have to worry about that, and also you don't have to have that dread in the back of your head that this was once a human being, or like I killed it, or like we no longer have to eat, with that kind of dread in the back of our dreadful feeling, in our minds. We can now eat freely, and whatever we desire we can eat, and we can
You eat meat that's sacrificed to gods that you don't believe in, right? That's what Paul says.
right. But at the same time, and I reference this in the article, is that in Acts chapter 2, I believe, or chapter 3, when Peter was in the roof of his house, on the roof of his house, and
Yeah.
he was praying or meditating, and God showed him a vision of all these different animals, clean and unclean animals, and God tells him to kill and eat. And Peter says, no, I don't, so do not make me eat unclean animals. But God says, now everything is clean, for you. So now you're free to eat everything, because we live in the time of Christ. So it's very interesting that God has connected what we eat with our differentiation abilities. God has connected human tribalism with the food we eat.
Right.
And when he says that now you can eat anything, everything is made clean for you, he's also saying now if you can have friendship and common meals with even the Gentiles. So he is closing down barriers on both fronts. He's doing away with the barriers on the food eating stuff, and then he's also breaking barriers when it comes to our interaction with different tribes. So that fascinates me, and that's why I think it's important for us to connect the eating of the food with anthropology, where we there is a societal effect of eating foods with so many people. It's like a shared common experience, and it's bringing a lot of people together.
Yeah. And it's interesting that quote you put from Jean-Michel Orgolian that talks about the fact that he hones in on a community um, from the Tupinamba people, which they are an example of the similarity between, you say, cannibalism and animal domestication. It says the future victims and victim prisoners of war are made a part of the community. They work, they marry, and have children. They are treated with the kind of double standard accorded the purifying and sacred scapegoat. They are driven to commit certain transgressions and are then persecuted and honored, insulted and esteemed. That sounds like politicians because they are vestiges of that. Finally, they are richly, and it sounds like soldiers and it sounds like police officers. It sounds like a bunch of stuff, but you can see the vestiges of these things psychologically. Finally, they are ritually murdered and devoured like the bear cub of the Ainu or the animals kept by pastoral societies. Gerard adds to Orgolian's observation. The cannibalism of the Tupinamba is simply an extraordinary variant of widespread sacrificial forms. In Central America, for example, the future victims in certain rituals have the privilege or obligation to commit certain transgressions, sexual or otherwise, during the interval of time between their selection and immolation. So again, it's interesting that it's like in order for the, it's a kind of interesting thing, and I may not be using the right description here, but it seems like it's not enough to be, if someone is too far away outside of your tribe, it's not going to be this irresistible object of adoration and repulsion. So when they captured these prisoners of war, they had to let them partake in the localness of everything in order to get enough sameness on them that they could then be successfully ejected, so to speak, or killed. There's this push-pull between attraction and repulsion that I think is very interesting. On the one hand, the crowd is attracted to the object of differentiation. But on the other hand, from the person who's been chosen as a sacrifice, they're not interesting if they're just totally different. They're actually a much more successful sacrifice when they have enough sameness to be in close proximity to the community, which then allows them to be a candidate for ejection, to be repelled, even though the audience, the community, which is interesting too, the community thinks of the person as wholly different. But in reality, if it was wholly different, they wouldn't be interested in expelling them for their problems. If someone comes in from a whole nother place without having some sameness attached to them, they're not as successful as a candidate for being ejected. And I think this is such a fascinating, phenomenon that needs further development on a lot of different layers, from anthropologists and researchers to understand this phenomenon, that you can't just be, in other words, a sacrifice who comes from a far off land that just shows up looking totally different, acting totally different, and then they kill them. How is that going to bind everybody together? Because they don't have enough sameness in them to be labeled as a transgressor of the unity of the community. They need to get some unity on them. They need to get some of the localness on them in order for them to be a psychologically satisfying candidate for ejection, being removed, repelled, sent out, cast out, killed. I want to, that, and it makes me want to study more about the difference between, or the similarities and differences between, the cannibalistic type sacrifice and the ejection type sacrifice. As we know, when we look at the story of Jesus, when they try to walk towards him off of a cliff, that's a type of sacrificial ritual that was common in that period of history in that region, where people would walk together as a collective herd, but they wouldn't lay a finger on the guy necessarily individually, but walking towards him as a herd, he's got nowhere to go but off the cliff, and he evades that. But that is a type of sacrificial act that was being done there, which makes you feel like it's an act of ejection, of removing something, expelling something. Whereas the sacrificial scapegoating of cannibalism feels a little bit different, even though it's in the same kind of, it's the same psychological result. It creates unity when it's effective, when it's effectively done. But the difference with that, with the cannibalism, is that you're eating the person, you're consuming them, and they're becoming one with your tribe, literally, as you physically eat them. And that feels like a little bit different from the ejection version of the sacrifice, but it creates a similar experience. It's interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, in what Girard describes over there, Girard and Jean-Michel Leon, what they describe over there among this tribe is that they have this tribe. They did that to that cannibalistic thing. They did that to prisoners, I believe, of for soldiers of the other war. So that would actually imply that the people whom they cannibalized were actually very similar to them in terms of appearance. Like, there's no reason to believe that they would have deformed soldiers serving like either tribes, right? So perhaps like that's the distinction there, is that human beings, perhaps they did not usually cannibalize deformed individuals, right? The kind of uh, sacrifices which would be common, when a plague hits, or when
Yeah, interesting.
epidemics
Yeah.
hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they did not share the sameness, like a deformed person would not share a lot of sameness in appearance with the crowd that was there persecuting that deformed person. So this act of cannibalism, and again, I'm guessing here, right? Like
Yeah.
like you said, this definitely
It's
needs
almost like
study.
there's a type of consuming, there's a consumptive, and then there's a purgation, like a vomiting scapegoat mechanism. Like if
Well, it
you're
also
tired of
it
everybody, you're stressed out, you think the gods are cursing you or whatever, you feel that feeling, and you look at someone who's highly deformed, like a hunchback of Notre Dame, he has to run to the church, right, to be protected. Or if he's in Greece and the pharmakos ritual is taking place, he's going to be thrown off of a cliff. It's like they're purging this this bearer of some kind of negative manifestation of differentiation. Like expel that person. They're like that because they're not good or they're bad or they're cursed or we don't want to be it's almost like there's this looking in the mirror effect. Like, what does that say about us? I don't know if they think that, but they might feel that way and they eject it, versus the other way of consuming it to take their power. Like a young soldier is not someone that you eject because they're, like you said, I like that they don't look disfigured, so you don't want to eject it in a purgation out of your society, but they're not going to be an attractive candidate for sacrifice until you get some kind of transgressions on them, right? They drank too much wine. You see what I mean? I like that. That's thoughtful. That they drank too much wine or they had too much fun at the parties. You know what I mean? They ate too much food, and that's why we have to sacrifice them, because you can't blame, if there's no deformities, if they're a fit, healthy young soldier, then what's the point of you don't need to purge them out. You want to eat them, but you have to have a justification for why you're eating them. So you have to have a little bit of some of their transgressions invited into their held up as like, well, you get to do these extra things to kind of give us a psychological reason, and it kind of like an inertia, almost like it needs to build up momentum to be able to have this kind of collective event take place.
well, it also matches up with what's going on today, right? With Hollywood and everything. Like these Hollywood stars, and not to get too graphic here with description and all, but just to make a overview of the whole thing. These allegations of abuse and everything that you hear about coming from Hollywood. Uh, why do they have these performers engage in a lot of transgressional things on screen, whilst putting a lot of makeup and all of these things on them? It's almost as if they are tapping into this very ancient you know uh, thing to puff up their victims prior to sacrifice, right? Where they
Yeah.
would allow their victims to engage in a lot of transgressional things. It's almost
Oh,
like
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah,
something's
like
coming up like
they
that in
have to be
modern day.
they have to be
Yeah,
punished because they got too much fame and adoration.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
That's why you that. So, but the difference I would say between them and today is that nowadays we can't really uh, perform overt murder and unify the societies, but it has to be done in a kind
In
of
secret.
in secret, and substituting the sacrifice, the actual cannibalism and the sacrifice for symbolic
Yeah, like
humiliation, something like that.
assaults and other things. It's just consuming the other, right?
Yeah,
In a
or tearing down
spiritual
the
sense, trying to
or
consume.
even or tearing down the aura of that celebrity figure, right?
Yeah,
Like smearing them and putting a kind of taboo label on them, like this guy was this and this guy was the this he engaged with this taboo activity, and so on. So that kind of like puts a damper on all of his aura, and just it's like a rise, propping up and tearing down of idols in our society.
yeah.
So the fact that we don't kill our victims anymore these days and cannibalize them is an indication that we're probably moving in the right direction. But
Well,
we
they
are
still
too.
have a fascination with their sacrifice,
Yeah,
like with Trump in the courthouse, the reporters that are allowed to go in there, they're fascinated with everything he does, like he's like they've got their god and they think this is going to consume him. And they talk about, well, he smells this way. I'm serious. I look at these reports They say that he sleeps too much. They're like obsessed. They're like, they worship him, right? These leftists and these conservatives. I mean, the never Trumpers and the leftists and so forth. They worship him more than his own fans do in a different way. And they're obsessed with, oh, he's asleep today. He slept for 5 hours. Is he sick? You know, it's like prodding a scapegoat. Like, is our candidate ready to take the heart out, or are they a little bit sleepy today? What does this mean? What is this going to happen now? What's going to happen? Are they going to jump up and down? You know, they're like obsessed with this person. You know?
They gleefully look on like this, you know.
Yeah, it's creepy, like a freaky cannibalistic tribe. They want his essence, right? They want to consume him. The wants to eat him. I've said that before. It's true. But we've talked a lot about the so-called, you know, these negative, well, it's not so-called, it is negative, this negative side of where we've come from. But Christ has unleashed us. I want to situate where we land the plane here with a little bit about the positive side of the mystery of life, which is that we have this great opportunity to, I like, you know, like you were saying earlier, with the, not just the reconciliation of conflict and reconciliation, you know, healing people who are in conflict, healing people who are in rivalry, worshiping one another, but also resolving matters of like giving us a window to the wonders and mystery that still await us. That there's so much mystery in the universe. I want to go back to, you know, some people call it Christian vitalism or whatever. I don't know what that is really, but it sounds a little on the surface like one of the things that we've been developing for years on this show, which is this pro-life view of Christianity. I'm just going to call it pro-life. And I know that's confusing because everybody's wired to think that's talking about abortion, but what I mean is pro-life, pro-creation, pro-joy, pro-wonder, pro-mystery, pro-life, supportive of life. That is an alien thing. So many people think of the religion as this dour retreat of life. Life is just so dark. It's so deceptive. It's so tricky. Our passions are so feeble. They get so caught up in evil and ego and all these things. You just can't trust them. So don't engage in them too much. Just enough to procreate, you know, not anymore. You know, just have this kind of fear of everything, fear of technology. If you want to do anything with technology, it means you're part of the New World Order. You're evil. You're a globalist. Whatever. The stupidity that's constantly wrapped up into the thinking of the ways in which people take on religion. I think it's, you know, maybe one way of looking at it is it's left brain hemisphere dominated a way of looking at religion instead of a right hemisphere dominated approach to looking at religion. I think there's different ways of slicing it. But ultimately, it comes down to this denial of life. And I think we need to recover an embrace of life that people should. God did not create us with our eyes so that we wouldn't want to see. He wants us to see things. He did not create ears so that they couldn't hear. He wants them to hear things. Everything about us, the nature that we see, all of these things are meant to be explored and wondered about. You're supposed to wonder. Part of having wonder and joy in life, and I know this is, again, weird that I'm going here, but it'll fit in if you just go with it, is having a healthy thyroid, which means eating foods that are pleasurable and joyful to eat, right? And not eating toxic foods. Vegetable oils don't taste good. They taste awful. You know, a lot of raw vegetables that are not that good for you don't taste that good. You know, fake foods and additives, they don't taste that good. Sweeteners that are artificial don't taste as good as cane sugar, you know, or honey, right? You know, almond milk doesn't taste as good as milk, fresh milk, you know, all these synthetic things that we're supposed to be told are the health foods. Deny your body, deny your health, restrict your calories constantly. All this stuff is an attack on God's creation. Ultimately, it's an evil attack on what we were meant to be, which to be reoriented. Repentance is part of it, changing your mind, but then you change your mind so that you can go in the right direction. And the right direction includes wonder and mystery and enjoying those things. You're not making movies as some, like if you're making a beautiful movie, like we talked about Twin Peaks or something like that, that has elements of divine ecstatic truth in it. That's not some kind of quirk outside. Well, that's that, but your real mission is repentance. No, you repent so that you can unleash beautiful art that reflects the mystery and and all of its ups and downs and the romance of nature itself, even, not understanding how it works.
Well, I think we have developed a kind of mindset where if we're having delicious food or enjoying, say for
You feel
example, a
guilty or
very,
something. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm with a very tasty sweet ice cream, I'm
Yeah.
licking it, but oh no, I'm supposed to stay away from sugar, that kind of thing. And I think that's all crap. I don't think you're supposed to stay away from the nice things, pleasurable things in life. And I think the same way, like it's not only towards food, but if you really look at it, it's we apply this kind of mindset towards so many things, right?
Yeah.
As if like we're not supposed to grow without putting ourselves through some torturous pain or something, right? For example, you mentioned the pro-life word. It's as if we're only allowed to use that word when we're debating about death, but we need to apply that word to all facets of life, right? Like pro-life, you need to be pro-life when you're walking, when you're running, when you're doing your job,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
need to be pro-life. You need to enjoy life. You don't need to hate your life. You don't need to develop a kind of reflex action towards your life by saying, I hate my life. It's just a small minor things that's it's like almost like developing a prayer, a mantra of hating your life. I hate this thing. I hate this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is like you need to chant. You need to have a mantra that is positive. That is like, Lord Jesus, I love you. Repeat that over and over again, and you will have all the positive life. You will love life. You will love life as how Jesus loved life,
Yeah.
like how Jesus, I think
Yeah.
Jesus was filled with ecstasy when he healed somebody from sickness. He enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, he would not. It's not like he's always, I have to do this once more, like this. No, whenever he was performing a miracle, he enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
And he also wanted, like when he was resurrected and when he got caught up, when he, got together with his disciples, his friends, once again, he wanted to, like, the first question I think he asked, like, is there anything to eat? I'm hungry, like he wanted to eat food, and he was hungry, and I think like we should be likewise hungry for all the lovely things in life, instead of developing a habit like the
Yeah.
establishment wants you to. They want you to be
Yeah.
sick about yourself.
Yeah.
They want you to feel sorry about yourself
And
and
you
hate
always have the
yourself. Yeah,
deprivation. You can't
right,
have this. You have to deny yourself because there's something about like doing, like, again, it's a hatred of the body, right? Like your body wants these things, so that means it's part of the flesh, which means that's evil and that's indulgent or whatever. But that's not the attitude. Gluttony is about worshiping something. It's not about enjoying things the way they were meant to be. I'll give you an example.
right.
Like there's, for example, this post that a Twitter guy named Raw Egg Nationalist, he posted a excerpt from a article in Neuropsychopharmacology. That's a peer reviewed paper titled "Testosterone Eliminates Strategic Pro-Social Behavior Through Impacting Choice, Consistency in Healthy Males." And the summary of it is that they rub testosterone gel on a man's arm and he will quite literally stop engaging in deceptive behavior because he has an audience, which is called strategic pro-social behavior, and say exactly what he thinks and feels, regardless of what others think. So, in other words, it's like a topical dose of Frank Sinatra's song "My Way," and not the words of this idea of saying exactly what he thinks and feels is a pro-social behavior that goes past this mindset that so many people have, which is they're not going to tell you what they think and feel because they want to know what they want to make sure they get approval from others. So, so what does it mean? Having a higher testosterone is a sign that you are flourishing with your diet, with your environment. You're having a low stress environment. You're able to like flourish again, because when you don't have those things, when you're always fasting or starving, or you're always depriving yourself, low calorie or other things, if you're always denying yourself joy and wonder and just a kind of spontaneity of life, when you're depriving yourself of all of that and you're doing the rote same thing over and over again with no joy, with no wonder and no spark of curiosity thriving and driving what you do, when that happens, your testosterone will go down, and other hormones which are related to stress will increase. Estrogen, cortisol, right? Your thyroid will be impaired. And what happens? You become a more repulsive person to be around. You become more likely to deceive. And when someone calls you out and says, tell me, what do you think? You're more likely to be like Peter and say, I don't know this man, because you want to fit in with the crowd around the fire. See, I don't know this man who you talk. I'm not related to this guy, right? You'll be more likely literally to join the scapegoat conformity of the world when you're lacking in testosterone. That little demonstration of putting a gel with testosterone on a man helped them tell the truth better, regardless of what people thought of them. So how, see, what I'm trying to show you just with this one little simple thing is there is a link between taking care of your body the way God desires it to be and being morally an upright person. Isn't that amazing? I think that is so, that just gives me joy thinking about that. I'm like, how cool is that, right? Instead of this stupid mindset we have, which is like, to be holy is to deprive yourself of everything joyful, good, and wicked. Yes, deprive yourself of wicked, but to deprive yourself of joy, wonder, art, the zest of life, that's a sign of holiness. Wait a second. No, that's going to probably put you in a state of mind where you're stressed out, alienated, and you're going to be more likely to deceive and not tell the truth and not live up to what you really truly believe in, to not follow your conscience, to conform to the herd. To stand out like Christ means you should embrace, if you can. Obviously, humans have not had this luxury all their lives. Sometimes they've had to eat very, stressful, environments, living under factories, living in dire, feces riddled streets of Rome, right? With fire inside the house, emaciating yourself with smoke in your lungs, highly stressful environment, eating garbage food, having garbage environments. Those things obviously do a number on you. But God wants us to have the abundant life, which means, you're taking care of your body and your hormones are in the right place, thyroid's in the right place. And what are you doing? You're able to tell the truth with zest and courage. You're able to have joy. You're able to forgive easier because things don't hurt you as much. When someone insults you, see, a lot of these things, what I'm trying to say is a lot of these things that we attune to little demons are often just hormones. Like that meme, it's just your thyroid. Get it checked,
Yeah.
A lot of these things, oh my gosh, I'm being oppressed by a demon. No, you're eating garbage food. You're eating thyroid. You're either eating garbage food or you're eating too low calorie or both. And you're having a stressful environment. You're doing a job that doesn't give you joy. You're in relationships that are not based on joy but on deception and scapegoating others, right? You're doing things which do not bring out the vital life force that you were designed to use in a creative way, right? And it's so fascinating that taking care of the body is part of being morally right, and it helps you become more morally right.
Well, it's so important that you brought up testosterone there because, just think about it. A lot of the things that we watch these days in media, or whether in media or online, even from the alternate media, is that testosterone or being manly or masculine is always associated with being angry or aggressive and being,
that's a lie.
That's a lie. And that's something that's dreamt up by demons, if we want to put it that way, that's dreamt up by demons in order to deprive you. Like that, if there is a demon in you, that demon's probably telling you to not, don't eat that, don't drink that, don't, that's too pleasant for you. But put yourself through pain, do my work for you. You can do,
And the demon
and
is really just the accuser spirit of the crowd that we're enmeshed in.
yeah, you're not supposed to eat that because you don't deserve to eat that. You're
Yeah, you're
unworthy,
a worm. You're a worm. God created you because he hates you and he doesn't want to see.
Right.
You better be so kind that he lets you into his house one day. That's not the purpose of the Bible. It's like an angry bully who has a tree house and he's like, I hate you. You're horrible. And I want you to tell yourself in the mirror how bad and wicked you are every day. And if you do it enough, and if you give my name praise and shine, maybe, just maybe, I'll let you come live with me. That's exactly what Jesus was like, right? That's exactly what Jesus was like. And yet, how many people live as if that's real? As if that insane BS is real. And no wonder people don't want to pick up and imitate Christ, because they get such stupid lies and slanders about this story, right? It's like, again, they get all these Plato or whoever the hell it is that they're bringing into their conflation of what Jesus is about to construct this austere, horrible hatred of life, which makes us just like, that makes Christianity just, people say, oh, Christianity is different. It's a denial of the flesh. No, all of these things, all of the ideologies make you deny your flesh. Freaking modernism makes you deny your genitalia, for God's sake. I mean, that's a lot of flesh that's being, so all of them make you deprive something. So what I'm trying to say is there's a time
on top of that.
There's a time on top of that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I wanted to say on top, like already there is this message of deprive yourself from red meat, deprive yourself from, whatever.
Don't have kids.
From property.
Don't have kids. Don't be creative. Don't build a house. Don't build a house the way you want to build it. Build it according to these zoning laws and codes that are supposed to be for your safety, but in reality are there to protect a racket of of people who have a controlling power over the building of dwelling spaces. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a rigged market.
And on top of that, you have this religiosity that's coming in that wants you to further deprive yourself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you are nothing but a sorry, miserable shadow of yourself. Remember when Jesus was walking around this planet with his apostles, they actually accused him of being a glutton. Remember that from the New Testament? Where they're saying you drink with the eat and drink with the with the sinners, and Jesus gave them a sort kind of parable or something, a warning, like when I eat.
That means Jesus was drinking grape juice with one group of sinners one time.
Right.
You don't get the accusation of being a glutton because you had a tiny sip of grape juice and one small meager chicken bone. That's not.
And
he was having a good meal. He was having a good time. You can't be accused of being a glutton if there isn't some kind of half truth that can be twisted. Right.
Right. And he was invited by all kinds of people. He was invited even by the Pharisees for meals, right? And for, wedding, all of these things. He was invited by Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and he was invited by these wedding, all of these things. He was always like,
and he had humor. I mean, in his story of being killed, he makes a point of inspiring his followers to make sure they include a story where one of his guys runs around naked in the middle of them being arrested. A streaker is on the field in Jesus's own persecution story, just so you don't become an austere killjoy in the midst of something which seems horrible and is horrible, cosmic implications. Jesus had a surreal sense of humor. I know people want to make meaning out of that more than there's other meanings there too, but just take it as it is. Stop trying to. That's the problem with dissecting scripture into an ideological thing. You dissect the scripture. Just take it as it is. He, in his sovereignty of the story, includes a story where a guy is randomly running naked while he's being arrested. Just imagine that scene accurately portrayed. That is a random event. That is surreal. And that shows you a side of God's humor that we're not allowed to be exploring, apparently, if we're picking the dialectic between man's religion and man's world, the man's worldliness.
Right. Right. And aside, I mean, that's a brilliant example. And even like people like to say, oh, wow, wow, but Jesus wanted us to fast. He wanted us to be hungry in a state of hunger,
You can
all
have
that.
that time.
But but here's the thing, even when Jesus told his disciples and future disciples to fast, told them to put oil on their heads and put on a face of happiness and joy, not as going around and being miserable. "Oh, I'm fasting," not like that. Even
Yeah.
at that state, you're supposed to be joyful. Even at that, in a state of fasting, you're supposed to be joyful. That's something not a lot of people bring up. They think, if you have to be like miserable, like, oh, I can't do anything, let me play some video games, I'm
Yeah.
hungry, or something like that. No, that's not what Jesus wanted you to do at all. Jesus wanted you to go out there and have a good time, even when you are fasting. And the fasting is not supposed to be the end, or to the means. The fasting is a tool that even actually some dietitians recommend to deal with digestive problems and so on and so forth. That's a
Yeah, it
tool
clears
to
out
achieve.
autophagy. It has autophagy, which clears out
Right,
bad cells. So it's a medicine. And there's a reason why
right,
you do it periodically. You don't do it every other day, like the
right.
modern world is trying to promote, like, fasting on an every other day basis. I think this ridiculous, because it's an attack on the health of the body. Your testosterone will drop if you do that, which means you're more likely to be a dishonest little weasel of a man. Okay, we want our testosterone to go up. We want our cortisol to go down. We want our thyroid to go up. And all those things are designed. God gave us a creation that can enjoy those things. To have fruit, to have honey, to have coffee. Those things are designed to give you that kind of zest for life, to not be like barely consciously awake, a state of stupor, a state of high stress, barely able to move. No, that's not the point. Why would God resurrect if the point is just the cross? He should have just stayed, disappeared. And then we're going to see him ascend one day. But he does the resurrection to show that the domain of death has been defeated in the middle of history. And now, by trusting in that reality, you can live it out. Trust is the word for faith. By having faithfulness to that reality and living as if it's true, because it is, when you live it out, you manifest it around you in a contagious, mimetic modeling of that reality. And that means that we are meant to enjoy the good life. We're meant to have beauty. We're meant to have beautiful architecture. We're meant to have, we're meant to be able to fly, and we should fly. And when people say, I believe I can fly, that dream of I can fly represents that childlike wonder that God wants us to have. Children, typically, if they're healthy, historically, have had a high thyroid. Over time, it gets diminished because of stress, which makes you a dishonest weasel more likely, or agitated, or more likely to be mimetically agitated and irritated by people. So it all goes hand in hand. Such is the kingdom of these. Such is the kingdom of people who dream big. Children dream big, audaciously. Children don't hold on to insults. They forgive pretty quickly. Especially, they don't hold grudges. They don't hold a fear matrix. And children certainly don't like to fast all the time. They like to enjoy rich, yummy foods, not overindulge. If you watch a child normally, if they're normal and healthy, they're not going to overeat, but they're going to eat to their satiation, and they're going to eat the things that are actually pro-metabolic. The children, when they're young, they like a ribeye sometimes. They like fruit, right? They like Jell-O. Why do kids like Jell-O so much? Because it's got gelatin in it. It's anti-aging. It's pro-thyroid. It's anti-stress. They like those things. They like honey. They like milk. Children's first food is milk. That's a pro-metabolic food. All those things are meant to nurture the vitalism of your body so that you can then do great things, do wonderful things, have joy, and spread it contagiously. Why are we going to spread hate? Why are we going to spread fear? That's not how you spread the kingdom of heaven. That's not how you exercise the dominion mandate. You can't. Think about this. If the world was not about mystery being investigated, what do you think Adam and Eve were dealing with the first day they showed up on the job of creation? That's a lot of mystery. They're situated in a garden. They don't know what a giraffe does yet. They don't understand what a hippo does. They don't understand what a stegosaurus does. They don't understand how like gravity works yet. It's all mystery right now. It's all mystery. They don't understand how fruit works. They don't know how to like make a fruit sweeter than it already is. It's full of wonder and mystery and unknown. The boundaries of the garden have not been fully explored at that time. God wants us to bring us back to that. Now fully equipped with the right Adam modeling, not the Adam that failed, but the Adam, he must have had a low thyroid or a low testosterone that day. He didn't tell the truth. He was dishonest. He was more interested in the concern and the support of men around, or the woman, in this case, women's approval, the woman's approval, than he was telling the truth, right? And so having that vital life force given back to us because we have the means of having an abundant life is what gives us the power to explore the mysteries of the garden that we're in.
I mean, just look at the Old Testament words to describe the promised land. It's said called the land of milk and honey.
Yeah, very pro-thyroid. Yeah.
Pro-thyroid, and the food that came down from heaven, manna. They said it tasted like wafers made out of honey. You know, like I said, they tasted sweet. So like it's not something that it's literal in the literal sense. It's not something that, you know, oh, it's spiritually going to taste sweet. What does that mean? Spiritually going to taste like sweet? It doesn't make any sense. It's like when we are talking about heaven nowadays, we are not only talking about gold in the like spiritual sense, or, you know, like the beauty you describe, right? The architectural beauty and all of that. The beauty that we see now in these cathedrals, in all of these architecture, that's going to be there in the coming kingdom, and it's going to be even much better than the ones in the cathedrals. And on top of that, you will be a part of that creation process. God will not come down from heaven and, you know, start doing that. God has given you the principle.
Yeah, you're going to do it now. We're going to do it now.
Yeah, you're going to do it now. And we're going to start eating delicious food now.
And the reason why the streets will be paved with gold is perhaps because we will understand the mystery of creation more and understand how to make gold out of trash. So you can literally...
There will be no more scarcity.
That's something that is so rare and hard to get now. When we understand how God created this world to be for our service, to love and enjoy each other, it will be to the point where something which people fight wars over for a nugget of it, they'll kill over a nugget. It will be so commonplace that you can make it the pavement that you walk on. That's what it means. Yes. That is the alleviation of scarcity through history, through nonviolent creative acts of wonder. Beautiful. I want to leave with this story. This is a story. I'm reading this book by Rupert Sheldrake. It's called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home and Other Unexplained Powers of Animals. And he has this little story I just want to leave here. He's talking about, he's studied all these different examples of the behavior of animals that doesn't fit what we know of known physics. Luckily, you've come to the show where we're talking about new physics for many years, so this should fit like a glove for what you've heard on this program. But he says, since the first edition of my book was published, I've received more than 1,500 further reports about perceptive behavior by animals, and my database now contains more than 4,500 case studies. And he goes on to say, I have also included the results of new experimental studies I have carried out with dogs and other animals, the most notable being a study with a language-using parrot named Kissy, which showed that this amazing bird responded to his owner's thoughts at a distance and actually said what she was thinking. So this bird, who used a little bit of language, had the ability, apparently, according to this case report that he reported as a biologist, that it would be able to respond to his owner's thoughts at a distance and actually said what she was thinking. So if she said a word or something in her mind, the parrot could pick that up. Now,
that's amazing.
That's amazing. That's a wonder. That's a mystery. So here's what we're supposed to do as Christians. Here's what we're not supposed to do. Now, unfortunately, I don't want to pick on it, but the normal tendency of the disposition of the fearful
That's a
religious mind.
demon.
Yes. Oh God. There's a demon in
It's
the
a
parrot. Kill it. If this parrot does not, if I say Christ is risen, and that parrot does not say he is risen indeed, I am to shoot it with fire. That is not. That is the trad move here, guys. And I'm sorry, that trad move is not traditional. It's modern, and it's got to go. Okay, we don't have to kill the parrot with fire if it doesn't recite the creed on prompting. If it's able to know what you're thinking. What we have to do is realize that we've been given the opportunity to go back to the garden, but better, to build a city. And building a city includes understanding how we were made and perhaps understanding frontiers of our current knowledge. Not see what happens when people say, oh, something unknown and weird must be devil, right? Okay, when you do that stupid move, here's what's happening. You're submitting to the gods of the city, which are evil, because you're saying that society and all of its powerful establishment folks have already set in foundational concrete the boundaries of what's normal and okay and what's abnormal and supernatural. And by doing that, you're actually worshiping, even though you think you're being highly religious. Oh, it must, if a parrot knows what I'm thinking and can say it without me saying it, must be evil. What you're saying is, I totally submit my mind to the conventional understanding of biology and physics and so forth, as people who aren't even Christian many times, and other people who are statists and so forth, who believe in worshiping the state. What they have told you is reality. You say, I faithfully submit to it, and anything outside of that must be an evil thing. So sorry, you're not following God there. You're actually imitating the establishment. You're imitating people who in many cases reject God. They reject the way of Christ. So rather than doing that, you can have a state of wonder. You can have a state of childlike excitement about what that means is left to be explored, what mysteries await all around us, instead of believing the lie of the establishment that we've already figured everything else. No wonder we're so miserable. No wonder we're so depriving of ourselves. We think there's nothing left to do. In fact, we couldn't be more wrong. The future is way, 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 way left unexplored. So many things are hidden, so many mysteries, even to the point where a parrot is speaking what their owner is thinking. And those relationships between pets, by the way, are usually built on community. It's not a random parrot. It has to be oneness. There has to be a bond between the parrot and the owner for that kind of dynamic to be explored, which gives us a clue about what it means to have fellowship. Isn't that fascinating? I just think it's so interesting.
Yeah, definitely is.
All right, let's leave it there with that parrot. And I appreciate you, sir, for coming on. Thanks for the article. It's available on our website on aneighborschoice.com. The title of which is, the article is called How the Eucharist Saves the World. And we can learn from a parrot, right? We can learn from a parrot more about the Eucharist and how it works if we have courage to be like children. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it on A Neighbor's Choice. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com, and also follow us on X at David Gornoski or at A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.